Welcome to the Lalulah podcast, real-life conversations about modern sexuality and how to live a happy, healthy, turned-on life. I'm your host, Laura Allen, a holistic health coach and founder of Lalulah, an online platform offering natural erotica toys as well as the educational tools you need to expand your pleasure in and outside the bedroom. Welcome back to another episode of the Lalulah podcast. Today, I am interviewing Cam Fraser from Karma Wellness, and Cam is a sexologist, a tantric yoga practitioner, sacred sexuality coach. He's an academic. He's a man of many, many talents, and I'm particularly interested in Cam because he speaks not exclusively to, but mostly to the masculine about healthy sexuality for men and modern masculinity in this 21st century. And I know for myself, having worked in this industry for many years now, that there is a lot of women's health, women's sexuality, you know, the goddess, feminine rising stuff out there, which is awesome. But to have a man speak up for all of the brothers out there, helping them create happy, healthy, turned on lives is just so epic. And in my eyes, Cam is just an absolute legend. In this episode, we talk about leaky sexual energy, understanding desire, what healthy sexuality for men actually means, and some tips on how to start living a life of integrity, purpose, freedom, and most importantly, how to create authentic relationships with ourselves, our environment, and others. This episode is great for all of our male listeners, but ladies, don't think that this content isn't relevant for you, because not only is it important to understand our own bodies and sexuality as women, but I believe it is equally as important to understand men's health and sexuality just as much, so that we can really start to support each other effectively and have that deeper understanding of our own uniqueness. I love this episode. I mean, I love all of the episodes, but I really, really love this episode. And don't forget to leave us with your thoughts and feelings on social media or comment on the blog post, because we would love to hear from you. Let's begin the show.
Hello, Cam. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. The first question that I've got for you is just a little get to know, and that is, what color are you today and why?
What color am I today? Okay. Today I feel blue, and I feel blue not because I'm sad, but because blue is the color that I generally associate with men, with boys. So I've been putting together all this coursework for like teenage boys and for young men, and all the colors I've been using for it are blue. So it's really, I'm sitting in a blue room as well right now. So it's very at the forefront of my mind right now.
Beautiful. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this course that you're putting together as well, especially for younger men. That sounds really cool. But the first question I wanted to ask you is, what is healthy sexuality? Like, it's kind of like a term that gets thrown around a lot, but especially for men in particular, like, what the fuck does that mean? And like, where do we even begin to understand what that looks like and start to sort of like cultivate these practices? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on a bit of a definition of healthy sexuality for men.
Yeah, no problem. So I've spoken about this like a couple of times before, but I have this framework, I suppose, that I like to use as a model for interacting with the world, and it's a model of like a trinity of relationships, so like this Venn diagram with 3 circles, and each circle represents a relationship, and they all overlap, and they're almost chronological, but they really intersect with one another. And it's the relationship that you have with yourself, your relationship with your body, with your mental health, with the food that you put into your body, with just the way that you treat your physical self through the five senses that we've been given. And then there's this relationship that you have with something that's greater than yourself. And so for a lot of people that are religious, that is their relationship with God, or their relationship with Allah, or their relationship with some type of deity. But for many people, this is like a relationship with spirit or with consciousness, or if you're part of the New Age movement, it's your relationship with Gaia, with Mother Earth, with Father Sky. But it's this connection, this relationship that you have with something that connects you to collective, to tribe, to community. So it's cultivating that relationship. And then there's this relationship that you have, this third relationship with other people. And this can be with a lover, or with a business partner, with a stranger, with a friend, with whoever, but it's just a relationship with the other, so the other person. And really the thing that binds those relationships together, at least in my perspective, in my opinion, is our sexuality. We don't necessarily recognize it, or we might be a bit unaware of it, but sexuality really plays a role and a really important role in my eyes, with our relationships with ourselves, with our relationships with spirit, with source, and with our relationships with other people. So a healthy sexuality is recognizing that it's very versatile, very malleable, and it can be across so many of these different relationships that we have. So it's understanding and being aware of that. But then also, I guess, consciously starting to cultivate, some respect and some reverence, and I use the word sacredness for those three relationships. And for me, that's what healthy sexuality is working it healthily and sacredly across all those three relationships.
Wow. So it's I'm also hearing there's something about kind of connection, authentic connection in there as well. Is that true? Or
yeah, 100%. Like if you're not being if you're not being true, or you're not being authentic, or not being genuine with your expression of sexuality, either towards yourself or towards other people, then it's not necessarily healthy.
Because even the word sexuality, if we were to just unpack that really quickly, we're not solely talking about penetrative heteronormative sex in the bedroom. It's so much more than that. It's kind of how we connect and relate to other people, and how we receive pleasure, and everything like that. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we're so I guess we're so conditioned to think that sex and sexuality is just it's just penetration, but like we're looking at like specifically sex ed, sexuality education looks like relationship education, looks like bodily autonomy, it looks like all these other aspects of the way that we interact with ourselves and the way that we interact with other people. It's not just what people tend to think of straight away, which is just penetrative sex, penetrative intercourse.
Yeah, awesome. I love how you put that. So you are a sexologist, amongst many other things. I'd love to know, like, what drew you to work specifically or specialize in this sexuality sector after doing all of your sort of psychology work and so on?
Yeah, I guess I'll try and be as concise and as brief as possible. But my story, I guess, began with regards to studying sexuality. It began in America, the southern states of America, and being in a community that was very conservative, very traditional with regards to the religion that they were practicing, which was Southern Baptism, so very Bible thumping, and the community that I was in, there was a lot of shame, a lot of stigma, a lot of repression, a lot of guilt surrounding sexual expression. And so obviously growing up in a community here in Australia that was not like that at all, that was very challenging for me. And I, like you said, studying psychology and studying philosophy as well, saw the detrimental effects that this was having on the young people my age, 17 to 25-year-olds. So that was kind of the eye-opening experience that I had. That was like, oh my God, there's this need for sex education. There's this need for this openness around sexuality, at least an open conversation, regardless of how expressive it is, but just someone to talk to about this. And so I started pursuing it a bit more in my own life, in my own kind of personal studies, and and then just, I guess, found out that there was ways that you could study this more academically. I'm very drawn to academia, so I decided to keep on pursuing it in terms of a degree. And then I also pursued it in other ways as well. So through tantra, through yoga, again, recognizing that sexuality is really so versatile and it can be found in so many different modalities and disciplines. Just piqued my interest, and it's something that I thought and kind of recognize is needed in the world for people to have some more open and honest, raw conversations about it. So, just kept on going, and here we are today.
Beautiful. What were some of the effects that you were noticing when you were living in this community? What were some of the effects that were happening from that progression?
Sure. I guess this is a generalization, but this is what I observed was because of this shame and stigma that was attached to sexual expression and sexual exploration. For example, the head of the student organization ended up coming out as homosexual and was asked to step down from that. That's just kind of one example of the shame and stigma around it. There was also the fact that these young women in the community were shamed into anything to do with sexuality. We talk about the princess and the porn star dynamic, or the Madonna and the Madonna whore dynamic as well. But there was this so much shame just loaded onto these young women for expressing anything to do with their sexuality that two things would happen, I suppose, at least in what I observed, was the teenage rebellion and these young women putting themselves overtly out there into sexually risky situations. Because there was no sex ed, there was no talk about contraception, no talk about consent. It was just these young women put themselves into these risky situations, I suppose. And then there was the opposite side of that, which was the stepping into the church community and the guilt that was associated with it, and the repenting that was needed, and all these other, I guess, really shaming and really toxic ways of repressing any type of sexual expression. And then for the young men in that community, there was tended to be a lot of stalking tendencies, because these young men weren't taught how to healthily express themselves sexually or express their feelings towards the people that they are attracted to. So a lot of unhealthy and abusive relationships, because there was no talk about what a healthy relationship looks like. It was just it was across the board. There was detrimental and dysfunctional and unhealthy. Again, this is my observation, my opinion, but ways of people interacting with one another.
Yeah, wow, that's epic. Thank you for sharing. I'd love to dive into now something around the mental health piece of this all, because depression and anxiety is rife, especially within men. And I really notice that there is this kind of collective story of masculinity being stoic and boys don't cry. And I'd love to know your thoughts on how it's gotten to that point. What are some of the biggest challenges that modern men are facing in terms of developing their masculinity in a healthy way with all of this stigma attached to it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is coming from my own experience as well, is tapping into your vulnerability. This idea that vulnerability for men is seen as weak or seen as feminine, and there's this notion that that feminine as opposed to masculine is weak, and which is just so ridiculous, and something that needs to be challenged. But that's the challenge, is getting men to realize that there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable, and that there's strength in vulnerability, and there's strength in femininity, and there's that it's okay to express these things that you consider feminine, because there's nothing wrong with the feminine, there's nothing wrong with vulnerability, and there's nothing wrong with expressing emotion and expressing what it is that's going on for you, and opening up about some things that are happening. And so this is a big thing that I'm trying to get to the men in the people that I work with, is that there's there's strength in allowing yourself to feel. There's strength in allowing yourself to express and to be upfront with what you're feeling and to communicate that. But yeah, like you're saying, there's this tradition of stoicism and stonewalling and closing people out, and you know, this, I love cliches, and so this cliche of like, you know, the man being an island and it just needs to be broken. You know, this it needs to be challenged, and it needs to be you know, accepted that there are other ways of interacting with the world that don't involve you just closing down to everyone and just trying to grit your teeth and not share. So I think that's the biggest thing, at least for me anyway.
So say we've got a man listening to this who's like, you know, really resonating and going, okay, I want to start to tap into my vulnerability, but like, what does that mean? And like, where do I go from here? Like, what would you recommend as some of the first steps that that we can take to start to learn about how to access that part of ourselves in a safe way and like communicate it and so on? Like, where would you start?
The first place that I would start is, and this is why I taught yoga for a long period of time, is getting people, especially men, in touch with their body. So like, we're so, I say we as in like men are so generally, I suppose, like closed down to our body, closed down to what it is that we feel, you know, physically. There's this idea that, you know, the reason why men aren't belly dancers and the reason why men aren't, you know, very expressive through movement is because there's this stigma attached to like being in your body, to actually noticing how you're feeling in your body. So the first thing I would suggest or recommend to any man that wants to start, you know, tapping into what it is that they're feeling, tapping into their vulnerability and their emotions, is firstly cultivating a relationship with their body, starting to, you know, really pay attention and open up a conversation, a dialogue with what's happening inside, what's happening internally for them. And the way that I learned how to do this, and the way that I encourage is through yoga and meditation, is just slowing down, is noticing how you're feeling, noticing where you're holding tension in your body. You know, usually you'll be holding tightness somewhere. For men, it tends to be around the lower back, but it could be anywhere in your body. Just starting to recognize that and maybe notice that you've been carrying that tension there for a while, and maybe see if you can start to, I guess, elucidate where that tension might have started to come from and what triggers that. So that's the first piece of advice I give to people, is start to do something that's gentle yet physical, that gets your body moving, that you can start to maybe notice how the body is feeling, because it's so linked to our mental and emotional health, the way that the body feels.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I really loved how you were talking earlier about this kind of like trifecta of relationships with self, spirit, and with your, you know, loved ones and your community. And I'd really love to hear a little bit more about that, and sort of maybe speak to, again, like, where do we begin to start to cultivate these healthy relationships in all of these areas? And what does that look like, you know, for a guy? Because I kind of feel like I know from being a woman and working in like a women's space, you know, I could say like self-love and look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself and have long baths and candles and all that self-care stuff. And then, you know, like embodying that in your day-to-day life and learning communication tools and boundaries and, you know, so on and so forth. Is it, you know, I feel like there's lots of similarities between like kind of men and women and how we can go about these things. But I always wonder if there are kind of unique ways that men can sort of cultivate self-love that's, you know, that is more sort of resonating with their like masculine essence. Do you understand what I mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think there's definitely ways. I guess, like, to preface that, you know, there's definitely I suppose ways that people can step into both their masculine and feminine energies, and that regardless of who that person is, they can, so if it's a man or a woman, they can feel more masculine and tap into that masculine energy, or if they're a man, they can tap into that feminine energy. But like, speaking in general terms, what I found for men with regards to creating and cultivating and fostering those healthy relationships that we were talking about is, and I'll bring it back to relationship with the self, is starting to do something physical. So many of the men's workshops that I've taught and been a part of, the platform for getting these men through the door to start doing some self-growth and self-development and self-exploration, I guess the way that we've enticed these guys to come and do this work is through some type of physical exercise. So there's a lot of value, I think, in some specific martial arts because of the way that the body is respected and the way that the power dynamics is set up with regards to sparring and that sort of stuff. But yeah, so I guess for men, doing something physical, doing something physically oriented, but there has to be that element of respect for the body as well. So I work with a couple of guys who have CrossFit backgrounds, and not that there's anything against CrossFit, but just the way that they were approaching their physicality was through just like trying to push through the pain, trying to push through the injury, really trying to get this end result, but not necessarily paying attention to what their body was going through in that time, and having this respect for the body and the way the body's feeling. And I feel like this is again a generalization, but I feel like a lot of men are doing this. They're maybe hitting the gym, or they're doing something with regards to their physicality, but not necessarily doing it with the intention of creating or cultivating that relationship with their body, but just to kind of get an end result. So that's like the first thing that I would suggest, and the first thing that I've kind of observed. But then with regards to tapping into masculine, this idea of presence, this idea of purpose, these traits of masculinity, I suppose. There's a lot of value in standing up for something, in getting behind something, a cause that you believe in, tapping into your integrity. There's, if you want to use Carl Jung's archetypes of masculinity, there's like this warrior energy, which is really important to tap into, and the warrior, as opposed to the soldier, which is, I guess, the unhealthy way of tapping into this fight response, or this fight energy, this fighter energy. The warrior believes in, fights for his family, fights for the rights of other people, but doesn't go out looking for a fight, but just necessarily stands up for something if it's challenged, and upholds his integrity, upholds his belief in this healthy way. The soldier just follows orders and go out looking for a fight, and brings the fight to other people. But so again, standing up for being an ally, or standing up for a cause that you believe in, or getting behind something that is benefiting the community, I suppose, benefiting a minority or something like that. So I think that's a really healthy way as well for men specifically to tap into that masculine energy and to start cultivating that healthy masculine response.
I feel like I want to speak to this kind of, because purpose for the masculine is really important. I mean, it is for women as well, but it's different for men, I find, and this kind of need to penetrate, this like penetrative force of the masculine. And I wonder if that can be confusing for men, kind of not knowing what to do with this, I want to say cock energy, but I'm not talking specifically about the bedroom. It's this kind of need this drive to penetrate what they're doing and their tasks and their purpose and their woman and, all of that kind of stuff. But did you want to speak to that anymore?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. The idea of penetrating the world, penetrating through, there's this idea, I suppose, that men can penetrate the world through two ways, through the cock, through the pelvis, through the lingam, but also through the throat, the Adam's apple. It's another penetrative avenue for entering the world. It's through the voice and through the word. And there's although there's been some many amazing public speakers and that are women. A lot of history shows us, and a lot of these public speakers are men. And it's this ability to healthily tap into the word and to the voice, and to project the voice and to penetrate the world through the voice, through truth and through authenticity, through the power of the word. I think that's another really, really important thing for men specifically to tap into, because so often we see that men do have voices that are listened to, and that could be potentially unfortunate, considering that a lot of men aren't aware of the fact that they have such influence with their voice and such influence with the voice that men have in the community. So I think tapping into that idea of being able to speak up for and penetrate the world with authenticity and speaking up for the people who don't have a voice and speaking up for the things that you believe in, I think is really, really important.
Beautiful. Gosh, I've never heard that before. Awesome. Yes, there's something about taking that time to, get back into the body, meditate, really ground into your values and what you stand for, and then exude that with this power center in the throat. I love that, and really kind of like penetrate with your vision and your purpose from that space as well. And that must feel so much more, fulfilling, and just, I don't know, there's something real juicy about that. As you were saying that, I was just like, damn, yes, totally. I'd also love to speak about desires. We sort of touched on this earlier about how when there isn't a lot of education or communication around sexual desire, it can come across really unhealthy, very leaky, stalkerish, like you sort of referred to it before. And I know a big question that has come up in my community. I'm surrounded by beautiful young men at the moment, and admittedly I was asking them what they would want to know in the lead up to our interview, and a big thing for them was understanding desire. And they're really open about being educated by porn, and then not knowing, like feeling kind of like they're in a straitjacket. It's like, what is healthy in terms of desire, and how can I learn to express my desires in a healthy way and still be in integrity, and all of that kind of stuff. Because I can imagine it must just get so confusing.
Yeah, there's this kind of cultural narrative at the moment that masculine sexuality is the violator, is the perpetrator, and there's so many stories kind of coming around, and there's, I guess deservedly so, there's this awareness now that, masculine sexuality and the expression of masculine sexuality can be quite aggressive and quite violent sometimes, quite abusive, which it's probably needed. That awareness is needed, but I think it's also important to start creating a story around how masculine sexuality can be expressed healthily. It can be this really beautiful way of expressing yourself, specifically for men who find themselves trying to tap into that masculine sexual self. And I guess I always bring it always back to the body, this idea of like tapping into where you notice your desire in your body. So for like a lot of men, when we feel sexually aroused, when we feel desirous, when we feel turned on, we tend to get this, I describe it as like this little spark, a little ball of energy just behind the lingam, just behind the cock, so like just internally, and it starts there. And this is like really common for men. We look at this like the way that men tend to be aroused is like from the pelvis first. So this is where all the energy starts, but it's starting to recognize that sexual energy and that arousal, the feeling of being turned on, doesn't have to stay in that area. And so often when it does stay in that area, this is when guys start to talk about this feeling of blue balls, or this feeling of like not being able to move that energy, feeling it stuck right in this area. But the reason why we can't move it, and the reason why it's not being allowed to move from the pelvis and from behind the cock, is because we're tense, because we're tight, because we're not sure how to express that energy. We're not sure how to, if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing to have this desire, to have this, to be aroused, to be turned on. We're so, and this is for everybody. We're so stigmatized with regards to being aroused in public, to being aroused in general. All you have to do is think of this, for men specifically, think of the idea of getting an erection in school and having to cover it up and not show anyone that you're feeling turned on or sexually aroused. There's so much shame around that still. But this idea of starting to express your desires healthily is firstly learning how to recognize that you can move that energy away from the cock. It doesn't have to be so phallocentric, doesn't have to be so centered around your cock. You can express desires from your heart, you can express desires from your voice, from your throat, you can express it throughout the rest of your body. But like tapping into that idea and starting to really notice that you can feel that through the rest of your body. It doesn't have to be so phallocentric, so cock-centric. I think that's like the key, I suppose, is recognizing that you don't have to be so focused, or not everything is focused around the penis, around the lingam. You can feel desires in the rest of your body, and just allowing yourself to feel like, maybe I don't want to be penetrative right now. Maybe I just want to be receptive, and I want to be open to other desires and other ways of expressing myself, rather than just being like, I need to show my desire with an erection or with my cock. That's the way that I express myself. So hopefully that makes sense.
Wow. No, I really love what you're saying there. I love the word cock-centric. I'm going to use that all the time from now on. And I love also how you're saying to acknowledge that desire and to not shame that, and to be okay with that and accept that, and then also realize that maybe it's not necessarily something that needs to be acted on in a like physical sexual way, but just receiving the beauty and the desire and the eroticism and the pleasure that you're getting from the arousal, and then moving it through your body and experiencing it in your body instead of it being a cock-centric experience.
Yeah, there's like this idea of, I guess there's like three ways of handling or managing a sensation and experience that's rising in the body. And that's suppression is the first way. So we try and suppress our urges, we try and suppress our desires. And I feel like this might resonate for a lot of guys. We try and push back our sexual urges, our sexual desires out of fear that expressing it, which is the next way of handling an emotion, might be unhealthy or might be received unhealthily, or might be received from a place of fear, from a place of rejection, I suppose. So that's our next way, which is expressing it. So I feel like a lot of guys tap into this as well, like expressing themselves sexually. They may be not well versed in how that looks like, or what that looks like in a healthy manner. So that becomes kind of detrimental as well. But then the last way of managing an experience, an internal emotion or feeling, is through sublimating, and is through moving the energy through the body and starting to notice that you can feel it throughout the rest of your body, and it doesn't have to be suppressed, it doesn't have to be expressed, but it can be moved through your body, and you can experience all those feelings and amazing sensations in that moment without having to engage with anyone else, really just by, like you said, enjoying that blissful energy, that blissful moment, just for you, and circulating through your body.
Gosh, I love that. It's what's coming up for me right now is actually something that happened last night. I was out with my girlfriends and a couple of our guy friends, and I just had this moment of looking around at all of these beautiful women. And I mean, like, the guys are gorgeous too, but I'm just like, there is just something about women. And, we're just so delicious. Oh, my God. And I'm looking at these girls and I'm just like, I love being surrounded by this feminine energy. Like, it is so nourishing and beautiful to just experience that sexuality and the beautiful, like, sensuality of everything, and just, like, show my kind of, like, love and appreciation for that. But also know that I don't need to kind of be a lesbian or like act on that sexually. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that either, but it's just it was like a kind of epiphany moment for me of just being able to like enjoy the feminine truly and deeply, and like receive the beauty and be turned on by it, and that just being awesome. you know?
Yeah. I'm just noticing all the nuances of your own sexual energy, not having to engage with anyone or label it in any way, but just actually appreciating and acknowledging and experiencing, feeling it. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Mm. Yeah. And when we're talking about like expressing our desires, we're not talking about like reading a pickup book or like, oh, you've got a lot to say about this, I bet. There's huge cultures out there about, how to kind of like pick up women and all of that kind of stuff. And that can be, you're probably going to be better to speak to this, but in my mind, I feel like that can be like one way to sort of like interact with the feminine, but it's still not quite learning how to express your true authentic desire. Like we're talking more about like communication skills, consent, understanding boundaries, how to say no, how to say yes, how to receive a no, how to receive a yes, and just being able to like really still stand true in your integrity and your purpose, and like learn other ways to penetrate like we were talking about before, or simply enjoy what's going on, or maybe even having a conversation with someone about your desire to be like, hey, I think you're really beautiful. I'm loving your energy. I'm loving this connection. And actually just being able to say that and being truthful just about that, but not needing it to be, let's go home, come back to my hotel sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. There's this like, there's a big fear for men around rejection and around, this, we've been so conditioned to not express anything that if we do express a little bit of what we're feeling, we have this huge fear of like, oh my God, what if this is taken the wrong way? What if this is, what if I'm rejected? And it's all this fear and anxiety response that comes up. And I had a little bit of this when I first started teaching yoga and first started stepping into the space of talking about sexuality, talking about expression, all this sort of stuff, because it was a very feminine dominant space. And a lot of the yoga teachers that I would interact with were women, these women teachers. And I felt like as a straight white guy stepping into this space, I was like, oh my God, I've got to be so careful and so cautious with how I'm coming across and the language that I'm using and the way that I'm interacting with my students who are women, because people might get the wrong idea. And I had a lot of this fear come up for me. And then I similarly had an epiphany to what you were talking about, this idea that like, I'm not actually doing it for the wrong reasons. I'm doing it because I'm passionate about it. I'm doing it because I love sharing this information. It's been a journey for me, and I want to help other people along on their journey. And I realized that I just need to be authentic. I just need to share from a space that that resonates with me, and sharing from the heart and sharing from a place of integrity and honor and authenticity. And as soon as I started doing that and started not worrying about how I was perceived, started not worrying about whether I was coming across creepy, because if I'm authentic and I'm just sharing from the heart, people, especially women, resonate with that. They recognize that energy, they recognize where it's coming from, and they know that it's not creepy because it's from a space of love, it's from a space of authenticity and genuineness. So like I always use this analogy as well of like, so if you're getting a massage, and I use this for women specifically, if you're getting a massage from you go to the local massage parlor or whatever, and you get a massage from a guy, and you can just tell that he's giving off a creepy vibe, right? Just this creepy energy, and you're like, oh, I feel super uncomfortable. And this is what I kind of talk to guys about as well. Then it's like, you're not giving that creepy vibe off if you're coming from a space of the heart, right? If you're sharing with love, if you're sharing with honor and integrity. Women specifically, if that's what your dynamic is, they're gonna pick up on that. They're gonna know that it's coming from a space of love and not from this creepy with these disingenuous intentions, I suppose. So that's what I think is important.
Yes to everything that you just said. And I'm super energetic, and I am so sensitive to people's energies, and I can tell from across the room if a man wants to approach me in that kind of creepy way, and it can be very subtly nuanced, but I love being approached by men. I'm in a monogamous relationship, and it's all great and perfect, and I still love it when a man has the courage to come up to me and tell me from his heart, I think you're really beautiful. like, I'd love to have a drink with you, but it just be very genuine. And and to me, I can tell so energetically before they even say anything to me. It's just like, is this man just coming up to me because he's trying to pick me up to go home with me later tonight? Like, where, like, is this coming from a like lusty kind of like sex center, or is he just genuinely enjoying this, like, my beauty and my charisma, and just wants to experience this connection here and now and not have any attachment to what that means or looks like? You know, it's the kind of intention behind it. And this, like, yeah, as soon as the sort of sex part of everything is kind of out of the way, and just being able to genuinely enjoy each other's presence and company and connection and beauty in that moment, that's when I feel like I can relax and I can share that with you, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, this like idea of just sharing energy, you know, like the masculine is polarized by the feminine. So the masculine energy is drawn to the feminine, and, you know, is attracted to the feminine and is aroused by the feminine. And that doesn't have to be sexual by any means. You know, it can just be energetic, you know, or it could even be, it doesn't have to be a specific woman or a person. It could be a place. You know, there's places in the world that exude like really feminine energy, and so like the forest, the rainforest, I feel like is like this real feminine energy. And, you know, we can get drawn to places like that, like Hawaii as well, like this real feminine, you know, energy that's exuded by a place or by a thing. You know, we can, you know, if we're super aware of the way that the masculine is polarized by the feminine and vice versa, then all we have to do is just go and receive the energy, you know, and not have to engage with it sexually at all, but just, you know, dance around and notice that erotic transference. You know, it doesn't have to be engaged sexually in any way. That's so huge for people to realize.
I love that. Yeah, I really, really love that. And I feel like it's also kind of leaning into a lot of this, you know, like modern monogamy just having such a bad rap, and every, you know, like, you know, most of marriages end in divorce rates and like bloody blah. And, you know, I feel like this kind of shaming around desires and this misunderstanding in terms of how to express our desires and enjoy connection and all of that kind of stuff is almost a part of that, because we're kind of like living in these relationships where we're not able to be fully expressed in a way that we're like seen and heard and respected and free. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're free to enjoy the pleasures of the world, but we also know where our boundaries are and how to kind of maintain the happiness of ourselves and our community, and sort of, like walk that kind of, like, it's a bit of a fine line, and like sometimes we kind of fall off, and, you know, we're always making mistakes, but yeah. Oh, I sort of went on a bit of a tangent there.
You're 100% right. Like, there's this idea of, I suppose, like the masculine seeking freedom and the feminine seeking love, right? And this, like, when we get this playing out in an unhealthy heterosexual relationship, the man who embodies the masculine, looking for freedom, tends to seek freedom outside of that monogamous relationship. You know, tends to seek freedom in what he perceives to be other women, but, you know, starting to recognize that there's actually a lot of freedom in a monogamous relationship, and there's so much freedom in surrendering into that relationship, you know, being seen for who you truly are and for all your desires, and being free of judgment and being free of expectation and being free of you know, all these labels and stigmatized things, and actually being seen, you know, for who you really are. Jim Morrison used to always say this, but our greatest fear is the freedom to be ourselves, and the only place that we can really be ourselves is in that really deep, surrendered monogamous relationship, I feel. There's this idea then on the flip side of that, which is this, to use the monogamous relationship dynamic again, the feminine or the woman in that relationship then, you know, who's seeking love, ends up, you know, really unhealthily attaching to that, you know, that the masculine, the man in that relationship, when this unhealthy dynamic is playing out, and, you know, tends to chase, tends to be attached, tends to be almost, you know, suffocating, stifling, and not wanting, you know, because she's trying to hold on to this man who is seeking freedom outside of the relationship. And so you get this dynamic where the man is distancing himself and moving further and further away, and the woman is trying to chase after and attach onto this man, and so you get this really not great dynamic in a heterosexual relationship, and yeah, so this I feel like that plays out so often in marriages and in the bad rap that you're talking about with regards to monogamous relationships is like, because we've been playing out that dynamic so much. There's this idea that so speaking specific to men and to the masculine, this idea that it's in our language as well. The old ball and chain. This idea like this notion of like having a sexless marriage, all this stuff that's like idea of stifling and being overbearing and stuff in being in a monogamous relationship. But if you start recognizing the dynamics and start recognizing where this power struggle and this power dynamic is coming from, you can start to change things and change that story and say, well, actually there's so much freedom, which is what I'm craving in being in this monogamous relationship, in being in this partnership with a person. And this can also be found in other types of non-traditional relationships, but specifically for this idea of this example of monogamy, this idea that you can dive deep into this sacred monogamy, and then this idea of living this really sacred monogamous lifestyle. There's so much more to it, and I do a lot of work with couples around that specific dynamic and stepping from this like unhealthy expression of masculine and feminine energy into more healthy expressions of that, and releasing that codependence and releasing that power dynamic and starting to develop each energy, each masculine, each feminine, and then coming back together, forming this kind of like instead of forming this yin yang symbol where the masculine and feminine are kind of like merged together. It's like creating two separate people. This masculine person, this feminine person who can express either one or the other, but choosing to be with one another every day, choosing to spend their life together, choosing to spend every day that other person, regardless of what that person is expressing, or regardless of where that person is at in their life, they've made that decision to choose that person, which I think is like that's where we need to start getting to, not just being like, oh, I've just stepped into this long-term relationship and I'm just going to let it run its course and not do these things that need to be done, or not understand that I can change the way that the relationship dynamics are, rather than being stuck in a rut. We're actually starting to evolve as two people and choosing each other every day, I think is the way that we should start moving forward with regards to healing these monogamous relationships.
Yeah, epic. I feel like we're going to need to do an entire episode on like rebranding monogamy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it needs a facelift.
It needs a facelift. Like modern monogamy just like needs a little bit of the like rebrand zhuzh. And I think, it just comes down to education and like prepping ourselves with the tools to understand ourselves better and be able to relate to our partners and, our friendships and our family as well. And, it's kind of circling all the way back to the beginning, and that, again, that little trifecta of relationships with self, spiritual and people, and how sexuality is so integral to all of those things. Because, again, like we said earlier, it's not just about fucking. It's about understanding, your desires and what all of this masculine and feminine stuff means, how you can stand in integrity with your purpose, how you can channel your sexual energy, how you can use your need to penetrate and seek freedom in a healthy way that's like really powerful and just so, so beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, definitely full circle. It just comes back to relationships, with yourself, with spirit, with the world around you, with other people.
Beautiful. Okay, so another time we'll do this little monog rebrand episode.
100%. I'm down.
I'm so down. Oh, okay. I'd just like to wrap up. So I've got a few quick cues, and my first one is: how do you cultivate more pleasure in your life?
Oh, what a huge question. I'll try and be
just quick.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. Cultivating more pleasure is slowing down and noticing all the little enjoyable moments of every single thing that you're doing. Everything can be pleasurable. Just slow down and notice what you're feeling.
I love that. Yeah, I'm so all about that. It's like my slogan, pleasure exists in spaciousness. Yeah, awesome. My next question is, what is one thing you've learned about self-love recently?
Oh, one thing I've learned about self-love is, specifically for me, is again taking time to not do anything. You know, I'm so used to thinking that self-love is about growth and progressing and achieving things, but I've recently come to realize that self-love can also look like just doing nothing and just actually integrating and stopping and being still, and doesn't have to be progressive. It doesn't have to be striving towards anything. It can just be stationary and being present and stopping.
I love that so much. I'm really resonating with that. I just want to like butt in real quickly. I'm personally at this place where I'm just like, I'm having such a big spiritual rebellion because I'm like, I'm done with the work. I'm perfect as I am now. Like, God, I'm just like, no more healing. Fuck, you know? It's like, I'm good. I'm actually, you know what? I'm good. I'm just going to sit here and be good. And that's good enough, you know?
Amazing. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. So my last question is, what is one of the most influential books that you have read? And I know that it is like asking you to choose your favorite child, but you can only choose one.
So this is a controversial, but one of the most influential books that I've ever read was, and this is personally for me, was The Game by Neil Strauss. And I just did a post about this the other day on Instagram, but it was life-changing for me because it opened up a world of a new way of communicating with people, and it was this idea of this alternative ways of communicating that it opened me up to down the track, learning how to communicate through energetics, learning how to communicate through different ways of communicating, learning how to interact with people through different styles of relationships. So it was very early on in my career, I suppose, or my life, that I read this book. And although initially I didn't take those messages on board in a healthy way, later on down the track I started to really appreciate the fact that book sent me on a new direction in my life. So yeah, that was a life-changing book for me personally.
Epic. And I loved that post. Like my heart exploded, and I'm going to link to that in the show notes as well. So yeah, it's great for girls, but particularly guys, definitely if you've got the time, just like have a quick squiz at it because it's a good one.
Thank you.
So how can people find you if they're curious to learn more about you, work with you, see more of your work? Where do they go?
The main places you can find me are on Instagram, which is at CamFraser400. I usually share all of my content through that. And then the other way you can find me is through my website, which is my business, which is Karma Wellness Perth. That's KAMA wellnessperth.com.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll make sure that we linked all that in the show notes as well. This has been such a great conversation. I'm super looking forward to our second episode as well. I'm just like, it's going to make a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you. Super grateful for you sharing, and I'm grateful for your work and for your knowledge and your wisdom and just being you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
If you enjoyed this episode, hit like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to share it with someone who you think could benefit from hearing it too. You can also sign up for Lalulah news and stay up to date with all the juicy content that we only share on email. And I want to take a moment to honor you for following your curiosity and prioritizing your pleasure in this way. And until next time, thank you so much for listening. And I'll be back with another episode soon.